Elias Brandyworth rushes to get a pregnant woman to the hospital. He insists that the ambulance drive carefully so the unborn baby isn't harmed. He angrily argues with Stephen Erickson that the military facility is too far away for the woman to receive proper medical care for her pregnancy. He stresses the urgency of the situation to the nurse. The woman's eyes start glowing pink and she goes into labor. Erickson shows up with military police and they detain Brandyworth. A sad Brandyworth reveals that the baby died during childbirth. Betsy Wilkins and Adam Wilkins weep as Betsy has given birth to a stillborn baby. A nurse returns with a healthy newborn, confusing the couple. The nurse explains that the baby needed intensive neonatal care to be ready for discharge. The overjoyed couple looks at the nurse as they name the baby Samantha Eve Wilkins. Later, the happy family goes to see a movie together, and Samantha spots Brandyworth in the theater, reaching out to her. A few months later, Betsy is feeding baby Samantha and trying to get her to say her first word, apple. Samantha instead says the chemical composition of an apple, showcasing her advanced scientific knowledge even as an infant. Years later, a babysitter is doing homework while watching Samantha. He asks why mercury is liquid unlike other metals. Samantha demonstrates her advanced understanding of atomic and molecular science. She explains that mercury is surrounded by solid metals in the periodic table, putting its outermost electrons in a symmetric and stable state. She adds that sulfur's 12 electrons are unlikely to form chemical bonds, keeping it liquid. The impressed babysitter offers her cookies if she'll help him with his homework. Samantha's talent for science is noticed by Dean Echevarria, who offers her financial aid for admission to his university, warning she can't lag behind. Samantha sees Brandyworth outside, waving and smiling at her. More time passes, and Samantha argues with her dad about being kicked out of school. She insists she only excelled at science, not other subjects. She angrily storms out, yelling that she wishes she was adopted. Betsy knocks and leaves dinner outside her room, but Samantha is upset it's chicken instead of a cheeseburger. Wishing for a cheeseburger, she accidentally discovers her powers to transmutate matter. At Christmas, she changes a gift outfit she dislikes into something better, and practices her powers to improve them. She soon uses her powers fighting crime for the first time, turning dog thieves' cages into treats as Brandyworth secretly watches. Brandyworth reveals to Samantha that he is her real father, and created her. He admits the government wanted to weaponize his work and make her a human atom bomb. But he fell in love with her mother and made a mistake. Samantha is overjoyed to learn she was adopted. Brandyworth explains the Wilkins stillborn baby was secretly traded for her to hide her from the government. He begs her to stop using her powers or the government will find her. As a teen, she debuts as the superhero Atom Eve, easily defeating Kilcannon, as Brandyworth emerges pleading her to stop. She argues she's protecting her identity with a mask. In the Pentagon, Erickson, Donald Ferguson, and Dr. Rogers meet. An angry Erickson says he'll shut them down if they don't produce better super soldiers. Donald argues they have Brit, but Erickson calls Brit outdated. They view 4 failed, disfigured creations, and Erickson orders them destroyed. But a team member shows Erickson footage of Eve exhibiting Brandyworth's traits. Erickson tells Donald to halt the destruction, seeing potential use for the failures. In an alley, Eve approaches Brandyworth, having studied his habit of watching over her. He wishes her happy birthday, noting her adoptive dad forgot. She realizes she doesn't know his name, and he introduces himself, explaining his former Pentagon role developing superhumans. She offers to buy him coffee, and asks about her mother, guessing she was his assistant. Brandyworth remembers she was a homeless woman, meaning he likely persuaded her to be Eve's surrogate. Overcome with emotion about her origins, he lies, unable to tell the truth. They're interrupted by a police siren, and Eve rushes off to help despite Brandyworth's pleas. Eve transforms into her superhero costume and flies to the scene where Bolt is already present. The police inform them that some hostage-takers match Eve's description. Phase 2 appears and promises not to harm the hostages if Eve doesn't fight him. When he tries to grab Eve, she creates a force field that cuts his hand. Angered, Phase 2 reveals his jealousy of Eve's perfection and says the other phases dislike her too since they were just recently created. The other 4 phases attack Eve, overwhelming her until she traps them behind a barrier and escapes through a hole she drilled. Phase 2 melts metal pipes into molten rock to follow her. Another phase throws plasma blasts, but Eve blocks them and escapes through a hole in the wall. Phase 2 smashes through the wall with an anchor-shaped hand. The 5 phases capture Elias Brandyworth. Eve rescues him and seals the wall, but learns mental blocks prevent her from using powers on living things. If removed, she'd be nearly omnipotent. Eve makes armor from matter and defeats Phase 2. As the phases melt away, Phase 2 says goodbye. Eve asks if Brandyworth is her real father. Their conversation is interrupted by Steven Erikson, who forces them into a helicopter at gunpoint and reveals he killed kids to lure out Eve. At the Pentagon, Eve surrenders if Brandyworth is freed, but Erikson shows Eve's mother, who birthed the other phases, is alive. He kills Eve's mother and Brandyworth. Dr. Rogers warns trauma may override Eve's mental blocks. When Erikson tries to shoot Eve, his gun turns to snakes. Eve cries that the men deserve death and she can rearrange their brains. Unmasking herself, she erases their memories instead. Regretting she didn't revive Brandyworth and her mother, Eve flies home. Her adoptive parents argue with Eve about missing her birthday. In anger, Eve alters a photo to show Brandyworth, her mother, and the other phases as her family.